Okay, illustrations for Chapter 20 of Among the Multihulls. 20 minutes. This is a slightly abridged but updated version of our earlier YouTube video entitled Riding the Wind. Let's start with our early Windrider 16 product testing. No damage to the boat, but I did damage the dock. This is Andy Zimmerman on the right and John Shepard holding the kayak, and they're the guys that really made Windrider happen. Behind them is the bank that at one point had loaned them $1 million in order to really crank up their burgeoning kayak manufacturing business. It was their Wilderness Systems kayak company that manufactured the original Windrider 16 and 17. Here's an early Windrider 16 sailing in the Florida Keys with an approaching squall. Note that she is wisely reefed down by rolling up part of the mainsail around the mast. This vessel has the wave-piercing bows of the Tuvalu proas that we saw in Chapter 17. She also features the steeply arched crossbeams of the prehistoric Balinese trimarans, all combined with the sit-in or so-called armchair sailing ergonomics of modern sea kayak. Here's the introductory advertisement, 1996, and note the motto, birds gotta swim and fish gotta fly. We really did think of this thing as some kind of a hybrid creature. Note that there is no centerboard, instead that long shallow keel on the bottom of the main hull. And the keel deepens the draft of the main hull enough to protect that shallow fixed rudder, not kick-up rudder. These were both features included to absolutely minimize cost. The boat was introduced for just less than $3,000. Here's one sailing in Hurricane Gulch off of Sausalito, California, an area known for its powerful gusts. And this shows how the trimaran differs from the catamaran. The lee float will submerge without flying the main hull. It tells the sailor clearly that the boat is being overdriven. Time to release the sheets, and she pops up and... But just how far can you push it? Well beyond the point where a beach cat would capsize. Note that the bow is not diving, water is not entering the cockpit. And yet, when the sheet is released, she pops up and takes off again. But Steve Short decides to reef the sail and avoid such shenanigans. Well, besides capsize resistance, we also wanted easy trailering, and heck, we found we don't even need a launching ramp. Note the compact package for the highway. Well, by now we were feeling pretty good about this little boat, so we decided to try her out in some bigger water. How about the Golden Gate? A nice mild day. This is the water where the early modern trimarans were first developed back in the 1950s. And I happened to have been there then, and it was great to get back in this water. We sailed out against the light breeze, but with the tide. And then we were able to turn around and surf back in. The little buggers sure could slide along effortlessly. So we took them down to Monterey, California, and went dancing around in the harbor for a while. That's my longtime cohort, Joe Hudson. We've both done a fair bit of seafaring in larger multi-hulls, sometimes taking off for years at a time with our families as crew. Oh, here's a tack. Nothing to it. But you have to watch out for the sea lions. Monterey Harbor is full of them. But boy, this kind of sailing is fun. So next we decided to get a whole gaggle of them together and make the run from Miami to Key West. 19 boats for the first Florida Keys adventure cruise in Windrider 16s. Now there's something rather zenny about sailing single-handed, even in a group, but by now the dealers were asking for a Windrider that would carry a family of 4. So up at the factory in North Carolina, that's what was going on. This is the cast aluminum mold for the Windrider 17. Here's a look at the process of rotational molding. There's a measured amount of granular polyethylene poured into the mold, and then the thing is closed up like a giant clamshell and lifted into an oven where it rotates like a chicken on a spit. The oven door is closed and the heat gets turned on, and the mold gets hot, beginning to melt the polyethylene. And as the mold rotates through a puddle of molten plastic, the oven rocks from end to end to evenly coat the inside of the mold with an even layer of plastic. After about 45 minutes in the oven, the mold is then removed and rotated over a bank of cooling fans. Then the giant clamshell is opened again, and out pops the first main hull for the Windrider 17. It was 2002, and now we had a real boat under us. But then the next thing we knew, there were Windriders all over the place. They were even having regattas. This one on North Carolina's Outer Banks. Here come the 17s starting a race in light airs. And here comes the winter, reefed down in a real breeze. Here comes another one, and note that he's pushing it pretty hard here. But unlike a beach cat in these conditions, there's no propensity to nosedive and pitch pole. But people soon discovered that the real difference in the Windriders was their ergonomics. You've got a padded armchair. You're captured up to your rib cage so you can't fall out. It's very comfortable. You have your feet down in the hull on the steering pedals. And you have all the controls right at your fingertips. Because you're steering with your feet, you've got both hands free. So you can trim the main, tack the jib, pull it in on the other side. Everything comes right to you, including the controls for the outboard motor. Well, by now we figured it was time for a little coastal voyage. Some coast, huh? You may have seen this bridge before. It spans Bixby Creek on the Big Sur Highway south of Carmel, California. We wanted to camp under that bridge, and unless you're a rock climber, there's really about only one way to get there. So we launched 2 boats at Stillwater Cove, Pebble Beach, and it turned out that there was quite a load to carry for a few days of beach camping on the exposed Pacific coast. The boats just seemed to swallow up the stuff, and as we headed out, it seemed like they would handle the load okay. But now, surf landings. Very fortunately, we were blessed with a mild surf. It was quite a campsite. But the beach had a 5-foot berm that we could not drag the boats over, so we just had to let them jill around down there at high tide. Didn't seem to hurt them. We spent 2 days here. The next day we passed an area where a big chunk of the mountainside had fallen into the sea. This is the steepest coastal slope in the contiguous 48. Big Sur, California, 50 miles with no harbors. We spent a lot of time examining beaches for one that was deep enough to camp on above high tide. And despite the inviting waterfall here, this one was too shallow. Late in the day we found one. The high tide from last night is at the White Stake. So of course the only footprints on this beach were ours. And to get here, you either have to be a sailor or a climber. And then, how about this beach? And this beach. Perhaps the loveliest of beaches. And when we were getting ready to go the next day, I really thought that we were lucky to have a little boat that would take us to places like this. Well, by now we were getting into hard adventure. We wanted to go someplace where things can go wrong. So here's the peninsula of Baja, California, God's little finger, with the Sea of Cortez on the right. Down there near Loreto, we found this cool little palapa where we could leave the vehicles, but there was no launching ramp. But with the four of us, we could just drag the boats off of their trailers and set them up there anyway. Now this time we had to carry all of our fresh water, but the boats seemed to handle the weight because it was basically a downwind trip. We surely found some grand campsites.
Hey, you caught one! Look at him go! So, yeah, good, okay, I got it still.
We had day after day of sliding down gentle seas together, interspersed with some wonderful times around the campfire with our friends Tim Ryan and Steve Short.
Oh no!
That's my old pal Joe Hudson telling stories there. He and I have enjoyed many exploits together for going on 50 years. Joe is always leading the way, like sailing into caves and then back out into sunshine. Now we have a problem. I'm standing with the camera at the high tide line. It's getting late in the day and our charts are showing us nowhere else in the area where we can stop. So we have to completely unload the boats, carry all of our stuff up over that berm, and then drag the boats up there.
Driver on hold. Here we go. Up we go. Up we go.
Fortunately, a polyethylene boat with a keel on it will take that kind of abuse. And that's why we had to have 4 guys to gang up on one boat at a time. At other times, with sheltered beaches, it was easy. But hey, tomorrow, let's go surfing. Side by side in an armchair. Well, all great adventures must come to an end. We'll never forget Baja. But Joe and I weren't finished. We wanted one more crack at the Golden Gate.
Actually, might be in the gate, though.
Yeah.
This time we had a breezy day, and with the boat lightly loaded, we went beating out against the wind and tide, tack on tack.
Yeah, I'm sure I got water on the lens. It's not inside, and I don't know whether to lick it or what. Here, let me... Is that any better?
Yeah.
Oh!
Joe is saying, sea trials, let's go. We really pounded the poor thing. Out to Mile Rock, where we could turn around and surf back in.
Off we go! Trippy!
Hey, that was an uncontrolled jibe in surf riding conditions. No consequent.
Hey.
No, you don't have to be always hot-dogging around like that. We like the quiet times too. And in fact, ever since we got stranded on that cobble beach in Baja, remember? Yeah, ever since this scene, we've always wanted a small trailerable trimaran where we could spend the night on board. So John Marples and I messed around with a new folding method for trailering, and I'll be darned, it worked. Here she is full size. We call it the Sea Clipper 20. It's for owner-builders, this boat. And it turned out to be a humdinger, complete with a nice platform for setting up a two-man dome tent. So you can definitely spend the night on board, but it made us ask, why can't we do the same thing with the Windrider 17? Well, it turns out you can. There's the 8-foot square platform made out of 2 sheets of plywood. Anybody can build it. The plans are free from Windrider. It makes for a cozy weekender, as Ron and Michelle will now demonstrate.
We got a little homemade stew going here. I could fish. I could have my rod in the water right here.
Hey, Ron, have you ever tried fishing under sail? That's the way to catch the lunkers. But of course, you might want to take the tent down.
Oh, yeah.
Are you full, honey?
Yeah, thank you, dear.
Of course, you can also use the table in the open for a very private picnic. But I must tell you guys, you can also take the table down and fill in the cockpit opening, pull your sleeping bags together, and have yourself a virtual floating playground.